Hi, I'm Chris Martinson of Peak Prosperity with your weekly update. What a week. Where do we even begin with a week like this? I guess I need to start becoming a little bit more serious about these updates. I need to start saying a little bit more what's in my heart around what I see going on in the world. And one of the spiritual practices I follow has a maxim which goes like this. It says, as within, so without. As within, so without. It means that it's illogical for you, the individual, to expect to receive happiness and peace and joy in the outer world if you're full of turmoil on the inside. More importantly, that if you want the outer world to shift, you have to shift yourself first. So I find it a little bit puzzling and really, how would I put this delicately? It's just a little bit immature for the country that I live in, which is the United States, to demand complete safety within our own borders, to demand that we don't have things like school shootings or police shooting people before they've even had a chance to talk. This level of violence that we have going on in our country is exemplified this week by a school resource officer wrestling a teenaged girl who happened to be black, he was white, out of her chair and just body slamming her because she didn't respect his authority, right? She didn't immediately get up when he said to. And I saw two sides on this, right? Some people were horrified, I think rightly so, by this. I was among those. I thought, if that ever happened to my child, it's not just the police officer in this case that I'd be having a big trouble with, but what about the teacher who felt they had to call a policeman in because they had a quietly sitting girl who refused to comply with an order to hand over her cell phone, right? What about the school administrators who backed up the whole idea that this girl had somehow violated policy and therefore that whatever happened next was unfortunate, but you understand when you violate policy, these things happen. This whole idea that the United States feels it's entitled to have complete respect for laws and rules and expecting and requiring complete safety inside of its own borders, when all around the rest of the world, we are doing the exact opposite, where we are spreading mayhem and death, where we are openly, actively creating conditions of chaos and turmoil and death in other countries. It's a violation of this spiritual principle I started with to think that you can be this way in the outer world, but then have this peaceful, wonderful, loving society on the inside of that. You just can't do that. You don't get the creamy nougat center if you got a bunch of pine cone bristly things projecting out into the rest of the world, as within, so without. So what I'm seeing now is this complete moral decay, a moral decay of extraordinary proportions. And what really ticked me off this week, was a guy I did a podcast with, love this guy, Bill Black, former SNL regulator, knows what's happening in the banking system cold. And this is my third podcast with him. Every time I talk with him, my blood ends up just boiling and I start connecting all these dots. So let me connect these dots. He talked to me about literally hundreds of thousands of felonies committed by banks where the SEC conspired to withhold the information from journalists, from prosecutors, from everybody when they had it, that the FBI was not investigating these crimes with any sort of vigor or rigor, and that the Justice Department, under Eric Holder and now under Loretta Lynch, but under the entirety of Obama's terms so far, and under the Bush II terms prior, nobody got charged in any of these big banks with any of these crimes. And so contrast this. There are people online saying, that girl should have respected that policeman. And on the other end, we have a Justice Department that has not prosecuted one case yet, not one case against a senior banking executive for multiple felonies, wire fraud, overt fraud, signing documents fraudulently and so forgery, you name it, lying, everything you could possibly imagine, right? So how is it possible to live in a society where you expect complete obedience to the law instantly, no matter how inane or asinine that command happens to be. And then at the other end, absolute free passes for everybody involved. You can't have that. You know, that's one of the definitions of tyranny is that the laws are applied arbitrarily and unequally. Well, this is what we got. So this is where we live. I think it's important to have this conversation. So this interview with Bill Black, which might make your blood boil, check this out at the site. That's one of the conversations we're having. And that's a really important conversation to have because right now as I speak, and this was going to be the subject of my big two-parter coming out next week, is a big, huge tour through the fact that the United States is now brushing up against China militarily, and China's saying some of the most outrageous things I've ever heard in my lifetime, such as you're about to start a war here. And at the same time, Obama just announced that we're putting boots on the ground in Syria. We don't have a UN mandate. Syria didn't invite us. There's no legal mechanism for the United States putting boots on the ground in Syria. So A, it's illegal if you care about such things, but B, it creates another possibility for a conflict to erupt, right? Another chance for something inadvertent to happen where United States and Russian forces accidentally encounter each other and bad things happen, right? So this is the world we live in. My request, the thing that I'm working for at Peak Prosperity every day, is trying to figure out how do we change this narrative? Because the narrative's broken. It's really broken, right? Look at the drama around, oh, are they going to extend the debt limit in time? Of course they're going to. I mean, how many times do you need to see that little act played out, right? Then there'll be some gnashing of teeth with conservatives going, oh, spending limits, right? And people on the other side going, well, we had to. And then they'll change places next time, depending on who's in power, and they'll continue the charade. Look, we need a new narrative. We need a new narrative that says the United States needs to begin sticking to its own knitting. We need to fix our own country first. We've got grade D- on infrastructure, bridges that fall into rivers, and towns around me that still don't have high-speed internet. Are you kidding me, right? So this is the kind of thing where it's like, look, how many ways do we need to see that we have misplaced priorities? It is totally an indication of misplaced priorities when you're having 17-year-old girls wrestled out and body slammed and no bankers going to jail. It's an absolute misplacement of priorities when Congress and the Senate can find money like that to pour into the Middle East for military arms, but can't seem to find their way clear to figure out how to pass a spending bill in time so that we have a budget. These things just speak to the fact that it's time to focus again on what's really important. So we have to shift the narrative. We have to shift the narrative. And so join us over at Peak Prosperity. If you haven't subscribed, come down. I promise it's not all just a complete bummer like some of this might have seemed to you. And to prove that point, Adam Taggart and I, we have a new book coming out. It's coming out very soon, and we're taking pre-orders for that right now on the site. And it's really full of hope, it's full of optimism, it's full of positivity, and it's realistic. It's saying, look, it's time for you to figure out how to get your own affairs in order, because let's be clear, the bigger world out there is probably not going to get its affairs in order before it has a moment, we might say, or some sort of a crisis that will precipitate some actual soul searching. But trust me, if you wait until that moment comes, if you wait to begin preparing such that the rest of the world is confirmed that it's time to do so, it's probably going to be too late. A topic we cover in our book. The difference between preparing and hoarding is when you start. If you start trying to get your needed supplies and build security for your family during the crisis, you're probably a hoarder. But before, it's a very, very selfless act of preparation. So that's the difference. Come to Peak Prosperity, figure out where you want to stand on that story, and we'd love to see you there. But so much to track. Until next time, I'm Chris Martinson, and I'll see you next week.